Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Called Women Show. Today, I have another fabulous conversation to share with you with one of my sweet friends, Jennifer Parr. Jennifer Parr is the co-founder of Let's Equip Inc. She is also an amazing wife and mother to two amazing children. She is a woman that is so beautiful inside and out. Her friendship in my life has been a blessing. And her words of encouragement and all that she represents personally, even just professionally, has been such a light and encouragement to me. Also, Jennifer, she prides herself in being the chief encouragement officer of her home. And I cannot wait to have this conversation with her. Can you guys please help me welcome Jennifer Parr?
Hello.
Hey, girl. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a journey trying to find a date and a time for us to be able to do this. But I know that our conversation today is going to be so life-giving. And I'm just so grateful that you said yes. And there's so many things that I want to talk about because you are such an interesting person, right? And I'm not just saying that because I'm your friend, but I feel like just in the short time that I've known you, I've learned so much about you and just how multi-talented, multifaceted you are. But before we go into those things, I would love for you to just share with us, how did you meet Christ? Like, how did he become a part of your life? Like, did you grow up in a Christian home?
Yeah, no, I think that's such a foundational question
Yeah.
because when we look at who we are today,
Mm-hmm.
it is often shaped by how we came to our faith, right?
Yeah.
And so originally I'm from Nigeria. A lot of people don't know that about me. Some people do. You
Yeah.
know, they see the melanin and they're like, wait a
The
minute.
beauty. Yeah.
But born and raised in Nigeria, and we came to this country when I was 5. So I grew up in a 2-parent household, a Christian household. We went to church every Sunday. And you know how it is. Like, if you didn't wake up to go to church, you couldn't do
Nothing for the rest of the day.
nothing else, right? So I think that gave me the foundation of making Christ consistent, where it was like once a week.
Yeah.
But as you know, like, that's just what we're told to do.
Yeah.
We wake up, mama says, you got to go to church. Daddy says, you got to go to church, so you go. I didn't really come to the Lord until college.
Yeah.
And that was because that was the first time I think my faith was actually being tested. So now it's not just like, okay, you're a believer, but it's why do you believe what you believe? I went to a very diverse university where there was a lot of Muslims and Buddhists and all different walks of religion. And so I found myself wondering, okay, I grew up in a Christian home. I'm a Christian, but why am I a Christian? So in order to do that, I studied the different religions because I had friends that were from those. And I finally got to a point where I went from being just a follower of Christ, or went from being a fan of Christ to being a follower. Because it wasn't just like, oh, I'm a Christian, but it's like, okay, this is why I believe what I believe.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I had to study the other religions. I had to know what it was about the gospel that made me confident in saying I'm a Christ follower. Wow. So college was really what kind of shaped me answering questions. And even though it was rough, even though to get there, I'm sure we all have college stories.
Yes.
But I think that's when God does his best work, when he's refining us, right?
And I absolutely love that you actually took the time to research the different faiths, right? Because I think that even as a believer, if you've been raised with the Christian faith, you can be afraid to actually do the research and find out, okay, is Christ really Christ? Like, did he really walk the earth? Is he really this? So I love, love, love that. Well, you know, before we go into like marriage and all of that good stuff, because I know that we can jam in there because we do have very, similar lifestyles and so forth. But I want you to share with the community your journey of singleness and how you managed your single life while also building your career.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I come from I should say lineage of like strong women in our family. And I think there was this pattern of like, You graduate from high school. Matter of fact, I remember graduating from high school and all my friends were getting like high school graduation rings. Do they still do that?
I don't think so.
But yeah, you get
But
like
I remember that. You could like order it in like a catalog or something.
Right. Yeah. And everyone was like, oh, I'm getting a high school graduation ring. My mom was like, you're not getting that because high school is nothing. We would celebrate when you graduate from college. So the expectation was high. And so graduated from college. I'm now adulting, so to speak, right? Single and just really figuring out myself. But then I found this pressure, and I'm sure women, you can relate. Once you start getting closer to 30, it's almost like everyone celebrates you up until that point for what you've accomplished. But then they start to almost shame you for what is lacking. And I found that pressure of like, oh, Jennifer, you're doing great. But who are you dating?
Or you extra caveat.
You're doing great. Or great, you got this job. But is there any special man in your life? And I started feeling that pressure. And I also had the desire as well. So I think my single season was really shaped by, if I'm being honest, society and culture and what was happening around me. And my success was based on what others were doing that were my age. And by 30, most of my friends or people around me were getting married, having kids. Some of them had 2-3 kids by then.
Wow.
So my singleness started to become very isolated. And it was very isolated.
Very isolated. So when did you come into just even the mindset or just even really beginning to cultivate the desire for marriage?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, by a certain point, I'm praying for a godly husband, right? I'm asking God to bring a godly husband to me. And I'm not going to say he didn't bring him, but I clearly wasn't like searching for them,
Right.
I was interested in some of the, rough around the edges.
Every woman got that. It's just like what they say. They like, I want a man of God, but like, or no, it's I want a woman of God, but in the streets, right? So it's even goes.
We know the saying. We know the saying.
It's real, yeah.
Yes. And I think that's fleshly. That's honest. That's real. That's a desire and that's okay.
Yeah.
But what's the priority, right? And so during that season, I dated a lot of different kinds of men, different types of men. But it wasn't until I did the heart work with God, right? And that was, God, am I looking for example, I loved, that I'm Nigerian, so I was dating like cultural men.
Yeah.
And I'm like, am I putting culture over them being a Christian? Am I putting culture or swag over their character? And so I started to look for the right things versus the wrong things. The wrong things were, okay, does he have swag? Yeah, swag is important, but is that what's going to hold a marriage together?
When you 80, 90, you're going to be like, what you wearing? Swag? I don't think so. You're going to be like, can I tolerate you? Will you take care of me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then even just the other things, I think character is so much more important.
Good, Jennifer. Yeah.
Even over chemistry. Chemistry is important. Chemistry is there in the dating stage. We know that, right? And that's what got me in trouble. But I think a man's character is so much more important than just the initial chemistry that you have, because that's what's going to sustain. So once I started focusing on the right things versus the things that, my flesh desired, here comes Allen.
Yeah.
Allen Parr.
Yes.
But the thing was, I was so focused on not making the mistakes that I had made that I almost missed my blessing in him. And so we met when I was 29.
Okay.
And we dated for about a year. It was a year. And that was the shortest but most intentional relationship that I was in. And I just remember praying for a godly man.
Yeah.
And then when Allen is like, hey, I'm really feeling you.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a wife. You have all the qualities. I got scared. So I prayed for something. I feel like God kind of gave it to me and then fear kicked in.
Yeah.
And I almost lost the opportunity, but I think that's why it's so important that when you are single and when you are dating and when you are searching, you have to stay connected to God's desires for marriage and not the world's desire for marriage. Because Allen had everything I knew that I needed and what was important for a godly marriage.
Yeah. And that just even reminds me of something that I always say. I'm like, God, he gave me what I needed, right?
Yes.
Because we all have what we want, right? It's like, yeah, you want, six pack. You want to
Yes.
just travel the world all the time, go to the best restaurants and just like do that, right? But like you've been saying, character, it trumps all of that. It
Yes.
trumps culture. It trumps just influence, really. So even when you met your husband, right, you were a boss babe, right? Like, quote unquote, well, not, it wasn't even quote unquote, she was, right? And I love hearing this part of your story because you are, and even during that time, were a very accomplished woman in your career. Like, you really loved your career. You were passionate about it. You stewarded that season well. But once you entered into marriage, God began to speak to your heart about how he wanted you to show up in your marriage as a wife and a mother. So can you talk about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate that season of being quote unquote successful.
Yeah.
But I was successful in my career and I loved my job.
Yeah.
But what good is a career and a successful job when you're great at work, but you're not a good wife.
Yeah.
You're not a good mom. You're not a good sister. You're not a good friend. You're not even a good human. I mean, you're just exhausted.
Just stressed
You're
out.
just stressed out. And so I think it's easy to leave something like a job or someone when you don't like them or when you don't like your boss or, you feel exhausted. It's really hard to leave a job when you love it. But I remember significantly like God just speaking to me saying that like, I didn't give you this job and bless you with this job for it to pull you away from the priorities that and the authority and the influence that I'd given you in these other spaces as a wife and as a mom and all that. So that was an interesting season.
Yeah.
My priorities were off. So we'll just start there,
Yeah.
right? The word priorities, which we hear all the time, first off, priorities is not even a word.
Yeah.
Priority is the word.
Ooh.
It wasn't until the 21st century, I believe, that we changed it to priorities. But priority means one thing.
Singular,
the main
like,
thing.
yeah.
Singular thing. Only one thing can be a priority or should be a priority, and that's God. But
girl, that is blessing me, y'all. Did y'all catch that? It's priority, not priorities. Okay.
So that was the first thing I had to just unlearn was like, I'm trying to have all these priorities, right? And God's like, priority, an audience of one. Like, start with me. And so during that season, yes, I'm thriving at work, but what was my spiritual life looking like? It wasn't strong. How was I serving, my husband and our family? Not good. I mean, our kids used to be the last one to get picked up from daycare. Yeah. I used to feel so bad. I'm like running, like, I'm coming, I'm on my way. And then, you pour into everyone throughout your day. You serve your boss, you serve your team, and then you get home and you don't have enough energy to serve your husband or yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that season was really about making the main thing and keeping the main thing the main thing. And that's starting first with just reorganizing my priorities.
Yeah.
So I left that job. I left that job that I loved and I came home to be first and foremost, make God the priority, but then also be a better wife, be a better mom, be a better just human. Yeah. Because our capacities, while women, we are amazing and we can do so many things. I just don't know if although we can, doesn't mean that we should.
Wow, this is so rich, Jennifer. And I think what's even more powerful is that I've been able to witness parts of that, right? Because I met you right during that time of transition. I'm getting emotional, but I think you have been such a light and even just an example, right, of like what's possible when you bravely say yes, right? Because it's not comfortable. And it's scary to go against society. It's scary to go against what you've been raised to believe is success. And I just want to ask you this question, and you may have even answered it throughout this conversation, but I just want to ask it directly. Like, what has been the difference in winning as a Christian versus a secular woman?
Man, that is such a good question because as a Christian, we're called to live a called life.
Yeah.
Called women, but the called life is countercultural.
Yeah, that's good.
And so I think the first thing in winning as a Christian woman versus just a worldly woman, which we're all of this world, is we first talked about priorities, right? Restructure your priorities. Like, is that priority money? And we need money, yes, to survive. But what happens when we make that a priority is now our worth is connected to that. Our status, everything is connected. Where God's like, no, make me the priority. I will fulfill all those other needs.
Yeah.
So priority, right?
Yes.
And making sure that you're keeping the main thing.
Yeah.
But I think that our flesh, as we know, is weak.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we are serving, whether it's our career, our entrepreneurship jobs, like who's the audience?
Yeah.
And what drives success for you, right? Are you trying to please God or are you trying to please people?
Yeah.
And I think as women, we fall into that so much, right? We want to launch that social media platform because we want to be seen in a certain light. We want to be seen as all this, but like the audience is supposed to be, does this bring honor to God?
Yeah.
Am I using my gifts, the right gifts, to bring honor to God, right? Now, you can do that. Your calling and your career can be connected. You can be serving in your church, you use your gifts, but if that's not where God called you, I think we just have to be careful that who is getting the glory from the fame, from the attention. And that is the difference. So when I look at when I'm getting ready to make that post and I'm like, okay, do I want to show off this brand new car that I got, which I did not get a brand new car, but let's just say I did, right? What is fueling that? I think in the secular world, it would be show off this, show off that, show off this. But then if you're a believer, you just want to do a heart check and be like, okay, I have these things, but it's only by the grace of God. It's only by the blessing of God. It's not because, yes, I may have worked hard, but God is the one who gets the glory, not me.
Yeah. And that's just so beautiful because even as you're talking, I'm thinking, this is just the heart of God for us, right? And that there's peace that's found in making him a priority, making him the foundation of our hearts to where we're doing everything out of the overflow of our relationship with him. And one thing that I also love about you and about even our families and our relationship is that we both are in entrepreneurial families.
Yes.
Right? And we could talk all day about what it's like to be an entrepreneurial family, to be married to an entrepreneur, and just building your life around that. So I know that I mentioned earlier that you find pride and joy in being the CEO, the Chief Encouragement Officer of your home. So how has that translated, right, into building your a family culture?
Yes. Well, first I had to redefine CEO, right? Because CEO, like you mentioned, was boss babe, slay. And you know, women, I want us to be very, very, very careful with how we use those words.
Yeah.
Because I think the intent of those words is to bring empowerment, to say that women can do things, women can do hard things, right? But when you look at the creation and how God created women, he created us in such a tender way. He created us in such a soft way. He put Adam to sleep to create us. He was like, you go to sleep. I'm going to just create a masterpiece in this woman. And I think sometimes we lose that when we focus on being the boss, slaying this, because God created us with such intentionality. His masterpiece is in the details of how he created us. So we bring that by walking into a room. When men marry us, what does the word say?
Yeah.
He that finds a wife finds a good thing. Yeah. We're the prize. Right.
Period.
We are the prize.
Yeah.
And so while you are maybe climbing that corporate ladder, or while you are being in that space where you are trying to master some title, I think we have to redefine what strength looks like and look at our capacities. And when we do that, we see that like my presence is valuable. The gifts that I have are valuable. And I can bring that and be successful in a home, whether that's and being a boss in the home. So for me, that was chief encouragement officer. It's like, okay, I was a CEO of my job, but I'm struggling in all these other areas. How can I use that gift and still be valuable in the home? And so our home is a space that is created where everyone that walks in that room, including my husband and kids, feels respected. They feel loved. They feel encouraged. That's a powerful role. You ever try to... People talk about companies all the time. People don't leave companies. They leave managers. They leave their bosses.
Yeah, that's true.
So if your boss is not really that like encouraging, it's not a fun place to walk. So as women, we bring that. We can bring encouragement. We can speak life into our kids, speak life into our husbands, speak life into a space and empower and encourage it and slay it, right? And so that's where God was like, you are still a boss. But I created you in this tender, masterful way where you can now bring that to a home and make it successful.
Yeah, that's so good. Because even as you're talking, I'm thinking, even just, what's helped me and my husband is, because we run a business, my husband, he would tell me like during the hard times, we're like, because I would tell him, babe, you know how to run this company. When it comes to running this house, I feel like we're not on the same page, right? So we've had to backtrack and be like, okay, how are we running our house? And what's helped us is to even kind of view it as a company, right? It's a company / ministry, and it takes a team, right? And I know that we've had conversations about just being able to have community, being able to lean on people, being able to have support systems, people to come in and help you to accomplish, the goal that your family is called, to meet and accomplish. So,
and I love that you said community because most women, Natasha, put that pressure on themselves. So now let's say God has called you home or you feel like home is where you're supposed to be. That doesn't mean you have to do it all.
That's good.
You don't have to do it all. Like you are gifted and we have the opportunity to, but once again, your capacity, our capacity. And so I love that you all look at it as like, this takes just as much work as running our business. And because we're not doing our business alone, what makes you think we can do this alone?
I don't know why we feel that way, because it was more me than my husband. He's like, babe, delegate that. I'm just like, no, because I think we just have in our mind, this is what a woman does and this is what a man does. And there are biblical things, instruction of what each are supposed to do. But when it comes to managing a life, right, that can cause a lot more stress if you're not leaning on your community and really leaning on people that God's placed in your life to help you.
Absolutely.
To help you.
And I think sometimes that comes from, I know when I was single, the Proverbs 31 woman.
Like
that was the woman everybody wanted to be.
Her. We had the shirts, the conferences.
I mean, she's to be desired, right? But Natasha, that's the thing. She's not even a real woman. Like, if you read the context, which is why context matters so much, this was who the king's mom was saying, this is the type of woman that you need for a wife. So she wasn't real, but she was this idea of what would make a successful wife. And so I think that if you're single and you desire to be that Proverbs 31 woman, she's a great woman to be, but never in that chapter, that verse, does it say once she did it all, like during the same season, right? She could have done it at different seasons of her life, but she did it all, or she did those things. But I also don't think she did it alone, right? You can tend to your home. For our home, for example, I remember having to clean our home, and I was like, this is what a wife does, right? Because she cleaned. She woke up and she cleaned every morning. Everything is maintained. Yeah, but like if I don't have the capacity to clean for 8 hours, because that's how long it would take me, there's nothing wrong with saving some money, making that a priority, and hiring help to come and do that. Even if it's once a month, once every 2 months, just to do that deep cleaning. So that's that pressure, I think, as women, we including myself, I had to remove in order for our home to thrive. The house needs to be clean, yes, but it doesn't mean that I'm the only one that needs to clean it. Food needs to be made. We all need to eat, but it doesn't mean that I'm the only one making food, you know? And I'm not saying your husband has to do it either, but maybe you could use a food service.
Yes. Here and there, maybe for like, if you know it's a really busy season, it's Christmas time or Thanksgiving, or where you're cooking a lot, maybe you order in and you have that put into your budget like beforehand. And I think that even just you sharing that, Jennifer, is setting a lot of women free. I think even just especially Christian women too, right? Because we are trying to become that Proverbs 31 woman. But when you were talking, it made me think like, if this was the queen's idea, her ideal, right? We all have an ideal woman that we want to be, right? Like, you know, down to our size, down to our hair, down to our mouth, to our feet. We're like, but you know what? We have to work with what we have.
Absolutely.
And I think this even helps me to go into the next question. Okay, so with your journey, I'm sure that there are a lot of women who are relating to your journey as a single woman, as a career woman, as a wife, as an entrepreneur. How would you encourage a woman right now who may be feeling that tug to let go of their job and to spend a season at home, but maybe they don't know how to start that conversation with their spouse?
Yeah. You know, I think we also have to give God credit about how he goes so far ahead of us.
Yeah.
And while we think that it's our job to convince our spouse, it's our job to tell them what to do, it's our job to even, you know, change them, maybe change their mind, change their hearts. We have to let God do what he's going to do. And I think that God speaks to men and women. I don't think he only gives men the vision. He gives us a vision too. So if you're married and you have a vision or you have a desire to do something that God has put on your heart, I think that the first thing to do, obviously, first and foremost, is to submit that also to God, to make sure that it is something that he can lead you through and not you wanting to do your own. But submit it to your husband. And I know that is not a popular response because we like to go.
Yeah.
We like to do things. I always say, you give me a crack and I'm going to kick that door open, right? You give me an opportunity, I'm going to go through. But when I was transitioning, I did not know that God had put the same thing on my husband's heart. Wow. He just didn't want to be the one pressuring me to do it. And I think sometimes we do the same things. If we have something on our heart, we want to pressure our husbands to do it. But I do believe in the power of the union. And I do think that you should pray with each other. You should console each other. You should see if God has put something on his heart too. And if he hasn't, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can still move forward with it, but as long as you all are aligned, right? And that looks different, that y'all are serving each other in different seasons. So fun story, when we started The Beat, I was the one behind the camera.
Wow.
Allen was recording.
I didn't know that.
Yes, I was the one because he had a vision. He shared it with me. And at first I was like, I mean, that sounds amazing, right? Here's how I can support. And I was the one behind the camera. I had communications background. He was a theologian. So we're doing it together, right? And now we're in a season where God has put something on my heart. And I've always had a passion for women. And I mentor women. I lead a Bible study every month. I just love pouring into women. And I try to do that alone. And it never went off the ground. And I brought my husband. He was like, babe, we can do this together. I can support you. So one, support looks different. And I think that's the next piece of advice is that if God has called you to do something and your husband may not be on board, it doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't support you, but maybe his role and his support looks different. Maybe his role is just encouraging you. And you have a team that helps you fulfill this, or you go forth, but he's supporting you in other ways, right? So sometimes God calls us to do things together. Sometimes it's together in union, but it's separate paths. But I think the key, women, we cannot forget this, is that I think it is so important to submit to each other's will and goals as a family and what God has for you. And so while I'm submitting to my husband respectfully, he also has to submit to God. And so I pray that he takes my desire and submits that to God to see how he can support that.
That's good, girl. Okay. Because just how you shared that, because even just for me with Called Women, right? It's been this to where it's been me and him. It's been me and him. Or there was a season to where I felt like I was supporting him through something. And I'm not going to lie, like I began to get really comfortable. And I was just like, okay, God, if this is the life that you have for me to, I don't want to say play the background, because I don't feel at all that I'm playing the background, because the role that we play as wife, mother, all of that allows my husband to do what he's able to do, right? Like we're a unit. But even as you were talking about submitting these requests unto the Lord, like I feel like right now I'm in a season to where prayers are being answered from me crying out to God, of feeling like, God, okay, I know that you've called me to this. I know that these dreams that you've given me, right? Like not even just in marriage, but as an unmarried woman, as a little girl. You have not forgotten that just because you have blessed my family or you've anointed my husband to do something specific. So I really do connect with that, of like, God is faithful.
Yes.
And even just with you entering into this season, like you've been doing speaking engagements and you've been faithful behind like the scenes, right? And you haven't complained, and girl, you're just amazing, right? And I think too, it's like, and this has happened within the last like 2 years with this transition. And now God is getting ready to, kind of thrust you into this new season of being able to do it even in a bigger way.
Yes, because if you go back to when I left my job, God didn't give me that job for it to pull me away from all these other areas. So when we have a calling, when we have a gift, if he gave it to you and you went forth with it in a season that maybe your husband needs you, your kids need you, it may not be as successful as you wanted it to be. So I think that as women, we do have to get comfortable with this S word, submission.
Yeah.
And it's submission because we are submitting to authority.
Yeah.
If you're married, you're submitting to your husband, but your husband is also submitting to a higher authority of God.
Yeah.
So we're all submitting here.
Yeah.
But I think under that submission is where God is saying, really, the focus of this is that I am the focus and not these other things. And so when I think of my women's ministry, right, and I love pouring into women, I've seen how in those seasons I try to do it by myself, right? It just didn't work. It didn't work.
Real. Yeah.
And so there's value. There's so much value in going together. You go further when you go together than when you try to do it apart.
So good.
And God honors it all.
Yeah.
He honors it
He's
all.
faithful. He's faithful. And I think it even makes me think of like, it's worth the wait, right? I think it's worth the sacrifice, right? Because I think some people want to stay away from sacrifice. When you think of marriage, people are like, I remember I did an interview and I had shared about sacrifice, and they were just like, I don't want that. If I have to sacrifice in marriage, I don't want it. And I'm just thinking, you guys, like, you have to sacrifice in life, period. You don't get everything that you want, right? But I think when you're submitting in a godly order, when you marry a man that is under the submission of God, and he respects you and he respects what's on your life, and he's taking the request that you're giving him, and he's also praying about it and considering it, right? Then that's when, everything changes, because God, he cares about us all. He cares about you, he cares about your husband, and he cares about your children. So as we wrap up this conversation, Jennifer, is there anything that you want to just leave with the audience that you want to encourage them with? I know there were so many nuggets that were in here, but I just want to give you an opportunity to share any closing words.
Yes. So called women, all women out there, right? Don't let society's timelines define you. I didn't get married until I was 30. My husband was 40. He's older. But during that season, there were so many definitions that came from the world. You should be doing this. You should have this. You need to be doing this. First off, should is a shaming word, so let's not use it. Let's take it out, but don't let society's timelines define you. Next, don't get ahead of God. Do not get ahead of God. Whether you're married, whether you're single, God has gone so far ahead of you in whatever that problem is, in whatever that challenge is in that season. He's gone so far ahead of you, and he's the only one who's going to help get you through it. So don't get ahead of God, right? His timeline is actually more efficient than ours. And then finally, I would say it is so important for you to know your worth because it's easy to lose it in so many different seasons. When you're single, you want to be married so bad. And so your worth now is connected to that title of being a wife. When you're married, you've now gotten the husband, right? But then you feel like, what do I bring into this marriage? What do I bring into this relationship? But our worth, God defines our worth, not man. Man will disappoint you. Man will fail you unintentionally, but it happens, but God never does. So know your worth. You bring value. When God created women, he created a masterpiece in us. Don't forget that. Don't let society's timeline define you. And I promise you, do not get ahead of God because he is leading and guiding you every step of the way. And you are right where you are supposed to be for a reason.
Woo! Okay, ladies. I know you guys are like, how can I get more of Jennifer? Okay. And is there a way for them to join the Bible study as well that you do?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I love equipping women. My husband has a gift for equipping believers as well. And so together we have a ministry called Let's Equip. You can find Allen on Facebook and YouTube at The Beat, The Biblical Encouragement and Truth by Allen Parr. But Let's Equip Women, I'm on Instagram. And so you can connect with me there. We've got some exciting things going on. We do a monthly Bible study, but we are also creating other things for women so that you can win no matter what season of life that you're in.
Yes, you guys. So we will put all the ways to stay connected with Jennifer Parr in the show notes. And friend, I just want to thank you for gracing the studio today because it was so much goodness that was shared. And ladies, I want to simply thank you for watching today's episode. I want to make sure that you stay connected. The best way to do that is to follow us on socials, on Instagram, and to sign up for our weekly newsletter. You can find that information in the show notes below. And also make sure that you subscribe, okay, so that you are notified whenever a new episode goes live. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll see you in the next episode.